This week on Brian Ross Investigates, Made in America? Wal-Mart and other big retailers tout their commitment to selling Made in America products. And now President Biden, like his predecessor, underscores the message.
And the key plank of ensuring the future will be Made in America.
But Walmart is now being accused of deceiving consumers about what is actually made in America.
Many of Walmart's own products, its own brand products, that were marketed as made in the USA, completely imported, made in China.
It's the same allegation made against Walmart almost 3 decades ago, involving clothing made at a notorious Asian sweatshop.
From what we saw in Bangladesh, it would be hard to overlook the fact that lots of children, young children, were making clothes for Walmart.
Will President Biden's administration enforce the law about what can be labeled Made in America? Plus, enemies foreign and domestic. What to do about the revelation of so many members of the military and police forces involved in the riot and insurrection at the Capitol. We'll be joined by counterterrorism expert Richard Clark. And this week's winners and losers in the media. See if you agree with the editors of Mediaite on their choices for who got it right, who got it wrong. From the Law&Crime Trial Network, this is Brian Ross Investigates.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our viewers on Facebook Live. I'm Brian Ross, joined by my colleague Rhonda Schwartz at Law&Crime. And Rhonda, we begin with Made in America, or is it? President Biden this week announced steps his administration will take to push for Made in America products, just like President Trump did during his term in office. But tonight there are questions about what that phrase, Made in America, really means, and whether American consumers are being deceived about it by some very big retailers. Rhonda?
That's right. It's a great sales tactic, and consumers love it. But consumer advocate groups say the rules are fuzzy and not often enforced. There is no requirement, no pre-approval is required to put a Made in the USA label or an American flag on your products. And the rules allow even small parts to be included that are made overseas, even in the trust territories as far away as Guam. Brian, it's something that consumer groups are really looking into.
Absolutely. It's one thing to say Made in America. It's quite another to actually do it, and for the Biden administration to actually enforce it.
This is our moment to build a new American economy. When we spend taxpayers' money, we should use it to buy American products and support American jobs. And the key plank of ensuring the future will be Made in America.
Even before the president's announcement this week, some of America's biggest companies had already jumped on the Made in America bandwagon. This Walmart ad boasts of a $250 billion commitment to Made in America products. But over the years, Walmart has been caught again and again using the Made in America labels for products that were not made in America. The Federal Trade Commission 5 years ago reported that Walmart had removed Made in America logos from its website. And now, a prominent consumer advocacy group is alleging Walmart's deception continues.
We're joined now by Bonnie Patten, who's the executive director of a nonprofit consumer advocacy group called Truth in Advertising, TINA.org. Ms. Patten, thank you so much for joining us. How did you begin to investigate what was going on with Walmart?
Well, we actually received a consumer tip in 2015 that Walmart was deceptively advertising Made in the US products, and that's what really got us started.
And what did you discover?
What we discovered was hundreds of products being sold at Walmart.com, the online shop, as Made in the USA that did not meet the FTC's legal definition of Made in the USA.
And what sort of products did you discover among the dozens you found?
Well, originally, when we investigated them in 2015, we found many of Walmart's own products, its own brand products, that were marketed as Made in the USA, completely imported, made in China. For example, they had Equate makeup sponges, marketed Made in the USA, when they were really made in China. But we found items from clothing to supplements, anything you could think of. We found an example where they were marketed as made in the USA when they did not meet that legal definition.
When our executive producer, Rhonda Schwartz, and I worked at NBC News in 1992, we found the same thing, that Walmart was selling products as if they were made in the USA. In fact, they were not, made oftentimes by child labor in Bangladesh and other third world countries.
Should a 12-year-old girl be in school or making clothes for Walmart? Anywhere in the world.
No, a 12-year-old girl should not.
But they are. We saw them.
Well, we have not been able to substantiate that.
But from what we saw in Bangladesh, it would be hard to overlook the fact that lots of children, young children, were making clothes for Walmart.
Well, I think this is one of the issues. They've been getting away with this for obviously multiple years, and made in the USA marketing pays.
So Walmart knows that American consumers want to buy products that are listed as made in the USA.
Absolutely. American consumers want to buy products that are made in the USA for a variety of reasons, from patriotism to supporting our economy, jobs here in America, to a belief that the quality of made in the USA products is better than that of foreign competitive products.
Now, your group has investigated companies in addition to Walmart. What else have you been finding out there?
Well, we found that a lot of very established, sophisticated corporations have been lying to consumers about made in the US origin claims, from Gillette.
And at our factory in Boston, 1,200 workers are starting their day putting money back in the pockets of millions of Americans.
To Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn.
Knowing, the associates that we have, the jobs that we create, and, the income that they can provide for their families is the most important thing for me.
All of them have made deceptive claims to American consumers about made in the USA origin claims.
With Pottery Barn, some products made for children, right?
Absolutely. Things like baby mattresses that are marketed as made in the USA when they're actually imported.
And what is the legal definition, according to the Federal Trade Commission? If you assemble products that are made overseas, but you assemble them here in the US, is that not made in the USA?
Well, that would be considered a qualified claim. So what you need to tell consumers is, yes, it's assembled here, but with imported parts and components. So the key for the law is that you have to clearly and conspicuously give consumers the information that they really desire. So you can't make the unqualified claim made in the US, but you could make the qualified claim made in the US with imported parts.
What kind of a reaction do you get from these companies when you knock on their doors and say what you've discovered?
As a general matter, they try and clean up the mess as quickly as possible. With regard to Walmart, they've come up with a lot of excuses over the years, saying it was coding errors, blaming other companies that advertise on their online website, but never really taking full responsibility for the deceptive marketing.
And what about response from the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, the government agency that oversees this issue?
Well, recently they've become very aggressive in going after companies that falsely claim products are made in the USA. When we brought the Williams-Sonoma information to their attention, it was the second time that Williams-Sonoma had been to the FTC, and they were fined $1 million.
What do you think would make companies stop doing this deceptive advertising?
Well, I think that the FTC needs to get much more aggressive in their enforcement of such claims when they discover them. I think the only way that companies will stop doing this is if it is more expensive to deceive consumers than not.
So if any of our viewers have questions or tips, how do they get them to you?
simply go to tina.org and you'll find form there that you could fill out and let us know. We're also on social media platforms and you can let us know there too.
Bonnie Patten, Executive Director of Truth in Advertising, tina.org. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
We asked Wal-Mart to comment on our report tonight, but they declined to have anyone appear on the program. And Williams and Sonoma, by the way, settled last year for $1 million to answer complaints they had misled consumers about made in the USA. Coming up, enemies foreign and domestic, what to do about both. We're joined by the former counterterrorism and cyber czar, Richard Clarke. You're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law and Crime Trial Network. American officials take an oath of office. They swear to defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And in the last month, we've seen we have plenty of both kinds. To talk about this, we're joined now by Richard Clarke, the former White House counterterrorism and cyber czar, author of the most recent book, Warnings. Mr. Clarke, thanks for being here. You also wrote something called Against All Enemies. Were you surprised to see so many domestic enemies against which we must defend?
I wasn't surprised, Brian, but the problem is all of the billions of dollars we have invested in counterterrorism since 9/11, that's all focused on foreign enemies. It's not really useful, most of it, for dealing with this new threat that we have. And the government has been very reluctant in the past to investigate our domestic terrorist threat, even though most terrorist crimes in the United States for the last decade have been by domestic terrorists.
We see the photos of a retired U.S. Air Force colonel on the floor of the United States Senate, dressed in paramilitary gear, and with reports that 1 out of 5 of the people in that insurrection had ties to either the military or to law enforcement.
Well, that's right. We don't exactly know what the numbers are nationwide, but it's a problem. It's a serious problem. And only now are law enforcement agencies around the country being asked to do some background checking and see if any of their people were involved in the Capitol incident. But how do you do that? How do you do that checking if you can't look at their phone calls, if you can't look at their emails? It's very hard to know. If you don't have the authority legally to look at their Facebook pages or their Twitter accounts. We have laws in this country for very good reason that protect our privacy rights and our civil liberties. And those laws make it difficult, with good reason, to investigate people in the United States if they are domestic terrorists. I know no one wants to infringe on civil liberties, and certainly I don't. But we have to find some way of balancing our constitutional guaranteed liberties with our need for security against enemies among us.
Exactly. Mr. Clarke, a question for you from Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
And while all this is going on, we still have some of our traditional enemies overseas. For example, how serious was this recent hack from Russia?
Well, Rhonda, it was incredibly serious. It was the largest hack in history. And it put back doors that allow the Russians to get back into hundreds of American companies and government agencies. So there are two things going on right now. One, the government is working very, very hard to see if it can find these back doors in the government networks, see if it can get the Russians out of our networks. That will be a difficult task. Based on past experience. And the other thing that's going on is the president has asked his National Security Council to engage with the intelligence community on a study of what the Russians have done over the course of the last 4 years, not just in cyber, but also in poisoning their internal enemies and a whole host of things that they have done, including undermining the American election process. The Biden administration is apparently, before they retaliate for this hack, they want to know what else should they retaliate for And how does this hack fit into an overall pattern with Russia?
And let me ask you this. Do you think the U.S. needs to retaliate in a like manner, some hack of our own against Russia?
I don't necessarily think we need to do like for like, but I do think we need to retaliate. I would preferably do the retaliation on a multilateral basis with our allies, particularly our allies in Europe. The Biden administration has said it wants to do things multilaterally again, no more going it alone, as the Trump administration wanted to. We need to have those nations behind us because they have also been attacked by Russia in various ways, and they've had outrages on their territory as well. Russia is a bit of an outlaw nation, but nothing has been done to treat it that way beyond some economic sanctions. The time has come, I think, for President Biden to talk to the French, the Germans, the British about doing something more systematic.
With these two streams of threats of foreign and domestic enemies, the Russians and the hacks, and what's going on internally with the far right and the violent far right, is the Biden administration team a good team for this? Are they in place to do something, do you think? You know them all well.
Well, I do know them all well, and they're all very experienced. These are not. This is not anybody's first rodeo in the Biden administration. They've announced a good team on national security and a good team on cybersecurity, and they're off to the races. They've already started doing the kinds of things that we've been talking about here, both asking for a review of what we do about domestic terrorism, and also a review about what we do with the Russians and with cybersecurity in general. The proof, of course, will be what they do, not the fact that they're reviewing things, but what comes out of those reviews and what they implement.
And is there any one thing you think they should definitely not do? One bad step could lead to real disastrous consequences.
Well, I'd be very careful about retaliating on the Russian cyber network of its doing exactly what they did to us. I'd be very careful about doing exactly that back, because people in glass houses shouldn't throw code. We live in a very glass house. We are very susceptible to Russian attacks, as solar winds demonstrated. So before we get our own house in order, before we get our own defenses up, we have to be careful what we do in the way of cyber attacks. That doesn't mean don't do any. It just means be very careful and very targeted about what you do.
Richard Clark, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Rhonda.
Coming up next, this week's winners and losers in the media. See if you agree with what the editors of Mediaite had to say about the My Pillow guy. You're watching Brian Ross Investigates on the Law and Crime Trial Network. Back now with this week's winners and losers in the media, as chosen by the editors of Mediaite. And we're joined by Aidan McLaughlin, who's the editor-in-chief of Mediaite, which, like the Law and Crime Trial Network, is part of the Dan Abrams Media Company. And Aidan, your first winner this week, Margaret Brennan of CBS, for the revealing interview she conducted on Face the Nation with Dr. Deborah Birx.
At that point, that the election was a factor in communication about the virus.
Yes. Yes.
Did you ever withhold information yourself?
No.
Some people felt you became an apologist for President Trump.
Tough questions, Aidan, from Margaret.
Right. So that was already a very good booking to get Dr. Deborah Birx, who was a sort of polarizing member of Donald Trump's coronavirus task force, on Face the Nation for this extensive and pretty revealing sit-down interview. Dr. Fauci has obviously been giving a lot of interviews about his time serving under Trump. This was Dr. Deborah Birx's first sort of big revelatory interview. And it was really well conducted by Margaret Brennan, who asked pretty probing and tough questions, as you saw there. She revealed insights into what was going on behind the scenes of the task force over the last year. And one of the best questions was asking whether or not Dr. Deborah Birx had become an apologist for Trump. She faced a lot of criticism for the way that she spoke about Trump publicly, despite what he was obviously doing behind the scenes. So Margaret Brennan really pressed her on that, and it made for a really great interview.
Absolutely. And it's always a trade-off between tough questions and then getting the next booking. If you're too tough, a lot of guests don't want to come on.
That's right. You don't want to sort of batter them. That Margaret Brennan did a really good job of asking revealing questions while still including tough questions that sort of everyone expects her to ask of someone like Deborah Birx, who, as I said, is sort of polarizing because of the public comments that she made about Trump. It was a well-conducted interview, and it was obviously just a good get to have Deborah Birx on for an extensive sit-down on the CBS News Sunday morning show.
Those Sunday morning shows are very powerful. Your loser this week, the Pillow Guy. Tell us about him.
That's right. Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow. He's been having a pretty rough few weeks. Bad news sort of keeps piling. One would not expect the CEO of MyPillow to be in the news so frequently. It's not typically something that you would expect of the CEO of a pillow company. But he's always been a pretty staunch advocate for President. He's been benign for the past 4 years. But then in recent he's become one of the more radical voices supporting the president in his fight to overturn the results of and that sort of he culminated in him repeatedly calling for President Trump to invoke martial law to stop Joe Biden from becoming president and serve a second term. That has resulted in financial trouble for MyPillow. A number of retailers like Bed Bath & Beyond and Kohl's have dropped MyPillow now from their stores. They say it's not ideological. They say it's because the pillows just the reason why those pillows are being dropped in January has something to do with Mike Lindell's rent. Yeah. Then last night he was just kicked off of Twitter, which was sort of a final blow.
I'll say it is. Well, a real loser this week, Mike Lindell. Aidan, McLaughlin, thank you so much for joining us, as always, with your insights.
No problem. Thanks.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. And thanks to all of you, our loyal viewers, for joining us as well. Thanks to the great team at Law&Crime for getting us on the air and off the air during these continuing difficult times. Have a good night.